Picture this. You're burying your father when your HOA president steals your $85,000 handmade boat for her brat daughter's graduation party. When the Coast Guard pulls them over mid-lake, this entitled witch looks the officer dead in the eye and claims she owns your boat. Then she completely freezes when he asks for the registration. Meet Tank Morrison, 52-year-old Coast Guard veteran who built Sarah's dream with his own hands as therapy after losing his wife to cancer. 5 years of blood, sweat, and tears went into that 28-foot cabin cruiser. Tank was the guy who'd fix your dock for free, help you winterize your boat, never asked for anything in return. But Vivien Blackthorne, the HOA queen bee, saw a grieving widower and thought, easy target. She figured while Tank was at his father's funeral in Montana, she'd just borrow his pride and joy for little Brittany's party photos. After all, what's he gonna do about it? What would you do if some entitled HOA Karen stole your boat and lied to the Coast Guard about owning it? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from, and if you've survived your own HOA nightmare. Tank Morrison wasn't the kind of guy who looked for trouble. After 20 years in the Coast Guard pulling idiots out of Lake Huron, he'd earned his quiet retirement. When Sarah lost her battle with cancer 3 years back, Tank thought his world was over. The smell of her lavender shampoo still lingered in their Pine Lake Estates cabin, and some mornings he'd catch himself making 2 cups of coffee out of habit. That's when he started building the boat. Every evening after his shift at Murphy's Auto Repair, Tank would head to his garage and work on Sarah's dream, hand-selecting each piece of mahogany, grinding down every bolt, testing each electrical connection twice. His calloused fingers traced every curve of that hull like he was crafting a prayer. Neighbors would stop by, drawn by the sound of his belt sander, and Tank would explain the difference between marine-grade wire and regular electrical cable while sharing a beer. Pine Lake Estates wasn't fancy 147 homes wrapped around a 200-acre private lake, mix of retirees and working families paying $485 monthly HOA fees. Tank's place was modest, 1,800 square feet with a small dock where Sarah used to feed the ducks. The crunch of gravel under visitors' tires was about the only sound that broke the peaceful silence most days. Then Vivien Blackthorne bought the $2.3 million lakefront mansion 8 years ago. Real estate attorney married to orthopedic surgeon Dr. Preston Blackthorne, and she made sure everyone knew it. Within 6 months, she'd maneuvered herself onto the HOA board. Within 2 years, she was president. Within 4 years, she'd turned the community into her personal kingdom. Vivien had a talent for targeting people who couldn't fight back. Elderly Martha Coldwell got cited for non-conforming mailbox paint after refusing to sell her prime lot below market value. Vietnam vet Tommy Kowalski faced daily harassment about his unsightly vegetable garden until he gave up and moved to Arizona. The pattern was always the same: find someone vulnerable, pile on violations, make their life hell until they sold cheap or shut up. But Tank kept his head down, fixed neighbors' problems for free, and minded his business. His military bearing and quiet competence seemed to keep Vivien at bay, until his father's heart attack changed everything. Frank Morrison, 78, dropped dead while feeding cattle on his Montana ranch. Tank flew out immediately for funeral arrangements, leaving Sarah's dream properly secured at his dock per HOA regulations. 6 days of paperwork, lawyers, and saying goodbye to the old man who'd taught him everything about fixing engines and treating people right. Tank's truck tires hit that familiar gravel driveway Tuesday evening, and something felt wrong immediately. The dock looked different, cleats bent at odd angles, rope burns on the pilings. He walked down to the water, work boots echoing on the wooden planks, and felt his stomach drop. Sarah's dream was gone. The smell of spilled wine and coconut sunscreen hung in the humid air. Red Solo cups bobbed in the shallow water near his dock, and from across the lake came the distant sound of laughter and music, his boat's distinctive engine rumble mixed with party noise. Tank's neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, appeared at her fence line like she'd been waiting. "Tank, honey, I'm so sorry about your dad." She twisted her wedding ring nervously. "About your boat? Vivien said it was fine. Said the community needed it for Brittany's graduation party and you weren't using it anyway." Tank felt his jaw tighten. 20 years of Coast Guard discipline kept his voice level. "She took my boat without permission? There were maybe 15 people on it, Tank. I tried to call you, but where is it now?" Mrs. Patterson pointed across the lake toward the Blackthorne mansion. Through his binoculars, Tank could see Sarah's dream tied to Vivien's premium dock, still loaded with party supplies and teenagers taking Instagram photos. Time to have a conversation with Pine Lake Estate's self-appointed queen. Tank walked across the community like a man with purpose. The evening air carried the sound of his work boots on asphalt, steady and deliberate. Vivien's backyard was lit up like a movie set. String lights, catered tables, and 20-something kids posing for photos with drinks in hand. The sweet smell of barbecue smoke mixed with expensive perfume and entitled laughter. Vivien Blackthorne stood center stage in a flowing white dress that probably cost more than Tank's monthly disability check. She was directing the party like a Hollywood producer, gesturing with her wineglass toward Tank's boat where her daughter Brittany posed in a graduation cap. "Excuse me," Tank's voice cut through the chatter. Conversation stopped. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward the guy in work clothes who clearly didn't belong at this country club gathering. Vivien's smile never wavered, but her eyes went cold. "Mr. Morrison, how lovely. I heard about your father. My condolences." She took a sip of wine. "I hope you don't mind, but we borrowed your little boat for Brittany's celebration. It was just sitting there unused." Tank felt his hands clench. "That's my boat, Mrs. Blackthorne. I need it back." "Oh, let's not make a scene." Vivien's voice carried that patronizing tone she used on service workers. "How about 200 for the inconvenience?" She reached into her purse like she was tipping a parking attendant. Tank's military training screamed at him to stay professional, but his grief was winning. "Ma'am, that boat isn't for rent. It's private property." Vivien's mask slipped. "Private property? We live in a community, Mr. Morrison. The HOA bylaws clearly address community resource sharing during member absences." Tank had read those bylaws when he moved in. No such provision existed. "Show me that section." "Perhaps you should reread Section 12, subsection 4. Her eyes flicked toward his dock. "I'd hate for there to be misunderstandings about those dock violations." Vivien's escalation came swift and vicious. 3 days later, an official violation notice appeared in Tank's mailbox. Unauthorized dock modifications with photos of his bent cleats, the damage her people caused stealing his boat. Fine, $150, increasing $50 daily. But Tank wasn't the helpless widower she expected. Years ago, Sarah had dragged him to a legal aid seminar about homeowner rights. The presenter, a sharp attorney named Rebecca Santos, had explained something crucial about HOA authority limits. They can't penalize you for damage they caused, and they can't cite private property not covered in original covenants. That's actionable retaliation under Michigan law. Tank remembered Santos mentioning that HOAs trying to exceed their authority often revealed bigger problems underneath. His counterpunch started with a simple phone call to Murphy's Marina. "Yeah, that fancy lady's been here 4 times this month," said Rick Murphy, wiping engine oil from his hands. "Always in that nice cabin cruiser, buying premium fuel, full service, paid cash, never wanted receipts." Tank showed Rick photos of Sarah's dream. "That's the one. Weird thing, she acted like she owned it." The mini twist hit like cold water. This wasn't opportunistic theft during his absence. Vivien had been systematically using his boat for weeks, maybe months. The violation notice wasn't retaliation. It was cover for ongoing grand larceny. Tank's Coast Guard buddy Jake Hendricks worked County Marine Patrol now. One phone call later, Jake was pulling fuel records from 6 marinas around Pine Lake. The pattern was damning. Someone had been operating Tank's boat extensively, racking up hundreds in fuel costs, crossing county lines without authorization. "Tank, this is felony theft with interstate commerce violations," Jake said over coffee at Danny's diner. His weathered face was grim. "She's been running what looks like an unlicensed charter operation. Want me to dig deeper?" Tank thought about Sarah, about his father, about all the neighbors bulldozed by Vivien's entitled behavior. Time to stop playing defense. Run everything her plates, boat registration, business licenses, and Jake, check what permits she has for whatever operation she's running. Vivien's response proved she knew exactly what she was doing. An emergency HOA board meeting was scheduled, agenda copied to all residents, addressing aggressive behavior and community disruption. One section specifically mentioned problematic military personnel and escalating behavioral concerns. Tank filed his police report for theft and vandalism that Friday. By Monday, every resident had received Vivien's counter-narrative in their mailbox. A concerned letter about Tank's PTSD episodes and concerning fixation on community property usage. She was trying to paint him as the dangerous veteran stereotype, unstable, violent, unfit for civilized community living. Classic predator behavior. Isolate the victim, control the narrative, make resistance seem unreasonable. But Vivien had made one crucial mistake. Tank wasn't fighting just for his boat anymore. Every neighbor who'd been bullied, every elderly resident who'd been scammed, every working-class family she'd targeted, they were all watching to see if the quiet Coast Guard vet would fold under pressure. The war was officially on, and Tank had no intention of surrendering. Vivien wasn't content with character assassination. She wanted Tank's complete destruction, and she had the tools to do it. The emergency HOA board meeting packed the community center like a town hanging. Folding chairs squeaked against linoleum as residents filed in, the smell of burnt coffee and nervous sweat filling the air. Tank sat in back, watching Vivien work the room in her power suit, whispering to board members like a prosecutor preparing her case. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vivien's voice carried across the room with practiced authority, "we're here because community safety is our highest priority. Recent incidents involving watercraft usage have raised serious concerns about liability and insurance coverage." She clicked a remote and a PowerPoint slide appeared, Emergency Watercraft Usage Protocol. Tank felt his stomach drop as she read the new rules: mandatory HOA approval for all boat launches, insurance verification requirements, daily inspection fees of $50. "These measures take effect immediately," Vivien announced, "retroactive to all existing watercraft." Board member Patricia Yates raised her hand nervously. "Vivien, this seems rushed. Shouldn't we vote?" "The board voted by emergency provision this afternoon," Vivien cut her off smoothly. 4-1, with one abstention. She didn't mention the vote happened in her living room with only her allies present. Tank's boat had already failed its inspection before the meeting even started. Vivien's hired marine surveyor, her husband's golf buddy, found 17 critical safety violations that would cost thousands to remedy. Until then, Sarah's dream was officially banned from Pine Lake waters. But Tank had learned something important about fighting bullies during his Coast Guard years. They always overplay their hand when they think they're winning. His Marine Patrol buddy Jake ran the boat registration through federal databases that night. What came back made Tank's blood run cold, then hot with anger. Vivien Blackthorne had filed an insurance claim against her own yacht 3 weeks earlier, claiming collision damage from negligent neighbor vessel. The neighbor vessel? Tank's boat, which allegedly struck her 40-foot sea ray while she was anchored. "Tank, she's been building a paper trail," Jake explained over scrambled eggs at Danny's diner, "creating legal justification to seize your boat for public safety. The insurance company's already investigating. They think something stinks about her claim." The mini-twist revelation hit like a depth charge. This wasn't random HOA power tripping. Vivien had orchestrated an elaborate insurance fraud scheme, using Tank's boat as both the weapon and the prize. She'd been planning this for months, waiting for the perfect moment when Tank would be vulnerable and distracted. Tank's homeowner insurance agent, Mary Riley, called that afternoon with disturbing news. "Mr. Morrison, we've received a liability claim against your policy. Mrs. Blackthorne alleges your boat damaged her vessel on May 15th. She's seeking $47,000 in repairs plus emotional distress damages." "Mary, I was in Montana burying my father on May 15th. "That's problematic for her claim. Can you prove your whereabouts?" Tank could prove everything: flight records, funeral home documents, hotel receipts. But more importantly, he realized Vivien's mistake. She'd claimed the accident happened while Tank was using his boat, not while she was stealing it. One phone call to his insurance company's fraud investigation unit, and Vivien's entire scheme started unraveling. Back in his Coast Guard days, Tank had investigated maritime insurance fraud. The patterns were always the same: fake collisions, staged accidents, inflated damage claims. What Vivien didn't know was that marine insurance fraud involved federal agencies, not just local cops. When vessels crossed state lines or navigable waterways fell under Coast Guard jurisdiction, it became a federal case. Tank remembered his training officer explaining how fraudsters always made the same mistake. They get greedy and file multiple claims. The computer systems flag patterns faster than human investigators ever could. Jake's deeper background check on Vivien revealed the smoking gun. 3 previous insurance claims in 5 years, all involving neighbor negligence and unsafe boating practices. Each time she'd pressured the other boat owner to settle quickly rather than fight lengthy legal battles. Each time she'd walked away with substantial payouts. But Tank wasn't some retiree she could intimidate into silence. That evening, Tank's doorbell rang. Mrs. Coldwell from down the street stood on his porch, clutching a manila envelope like it contained state secrets. "Tank, honey, I know what Vivien's doing to you." Martha Coldwell was 78, sharp as a tack, and mad as hell. "She did the same thing to my Harold before he passed, made his last months miserable with violations and harassment." Martha opened the envelope, revealing years of documented harassment photos, violation notices, recorded phone calls where Vivien threatened elderly residents. "She targets people who can't fight back, veterans, widows, retirees, anyone who might not understand their rights or have money for lawyers. Why didn't you report this?" Martha's eyes flashed. "Who was I going to report it to? The board she controls? The police who think it's just neighborhood squabbles?" She placed the envelope in Tank's hands. "But you're different. You know how to fight systems. You can stop her." Looking through Martha's documentation, Tank saw the pattern clearly. Vivien wasn't just a petty HOA tyrant. She was running a systematic extortion racket, using her legal knowledge and position to defraud vulnerable residents. The war had just become a federal case. Vivien's next move showed she was getting desperate and dangerous people make stupid mistakes. Tank woke Thursday morning to find county environmental officials in hazmat suits swarming his dock. Their white van blocked his driveway, and yellow caution tape fluttered in the breeze like crime scene decoration. The acrid smell of diesel exhaust mixed with morning coffee as generators powered their testing equipment. "Sir, we're responding to reports of fuel contamination from your vessel," announced Agent Rodriguez, consulting his clipboard. Anonymous tip claimed significant petroleum discharge into Pine Lake waters. Tank watched them probe around his dock with electronic sensors, taking water samples where his boat should have been moored. These weren't local code enforcement yahoos. These were serious federal environmental investigators with serious equipment. "Agent Rodriguez, my boat hasn't been in that slip for over a week. It's been impounded under false HOA regulations." The agent looked confused. "Sir, the complaint specifically mentioned active fuel leaks from a vessel registered to this address." Tank pointed across the lake where Sarah's Dream sat at Vivien's premium dock. "That's my boat over there. Has been since Mrs. Blackthorne stole it for her daughter's party." Rodriguez followed Tank's gesture, then radioed his team. Within minutes, they'd relocated their entire operation to Vivien's waterfront. Tank watched through binoculars as Vivien emerged from her mansion in a silk robe, gesturing wildly at the investigators crawling over his boat. The mini twist came when Rodriguez returned 3 hours later with surprising news. "Mr. Morrison, we found evidence of fuel system tampering on your vessel. Someone loosened fuel line connections and punctured the reserve tank. Looks like deliberate sabotage designed to create environmental violations." Tank felt his jaw clench. Vivien hadn't just stolen his boat, she'd tried to frame him for environmental crimes by damaging it herself. But her sabotage backfired when the boat wasn't where she expected it to be. His phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Meet me at the marina. Bring coffee. You're gonna need it." At Murphy's Marina, Jake spread federal maritime violation reports across a greasy table in the office. The smell of two-stroke oil and cigarette smoke couldn't mask the gravity of what he'd discovered. "Tank, your HOA president has been running an unlicensed charter operation using residents' boats. Look at this." Jake pointed to Coast Guard inspection records. "Vivien's been advertising luxury lake experiences on social media, charging $500 a day for private boat tours. She's got Instagram posts, booking websites, the whole operation." The evidence was damning. Dozens of photos showing Vivien hosting paying customers on various boats around Pine Lake, including Sarah's Dream, professional catering, champagne service, corporate team-building events, all without proper commercial vessel permits, captain's licenses, or passenger insurance. Tank remembered something from his Coast Guard training about unlicensed charter operations. They carried serious federal penalties because passenger safety fell under maritime law. The Coast Guard didn't mess around with people who put civilians at risk for profit. How long has this been going on? At least 18 months, maybe longer. Jake pulled out his phone. "But here's the kicker, she's been using the HOA as cover, claiming the boats are community assets for member recreation. Perfect legal shield until someone like you fights back." Tank studied the evidence, pieces falling into place. Every boat owner Vivien had targeted, every violation she'd filed, every resident she'd bullied into selling it was all connected to her illegal charter business. She needed access to various boats to maintain the appearance of a legitimate fleet. Jake, what happens when the Coast Guard finds out about unlicensed commercial operations? Federal charges, maritime law violations carry up to 5 years per incident, plus massive fines. And if anyone got hurt during one of her charters, Jake's expression darkened. She'd be looking at negligent endangerment charges. That afternoon, Tank's doorbell rang again. This time it was County Prosecutor Rebecca Santos, the same attorney Sarah had dragged him to hear speak about homeowner rights years ago. She looked exactly the same sharp business suit, no-nonsense demeanor, eyes that missed nothing. Mr. Morrison, I understand you're having some interesting problems with your HOA president. Santos stepped into Tank's living room without invitation. Mind if we discuss federal maritime law over coffee? She explained that Vivien's pattern of harassment had caught the attention of multiple agencies. Insurance fraud crossed state lines, making it FBI jurisdiction. Environmental sabotage involved federal waterways, bringing in the EPA. Unlicensed charter operations fell under Coast Guard authority. The county prosecutor's office was coordinating a multi-agency investigation. But here's what I need from you, Mr. Morrison. We need evidence of her ongoing criminal enterprise. Can you help us catch her in the act? Tank thought about Martha's envelope full of harassment documentation, about all the neighbors too scared to fight back, about Sarah and what she'd want him to do. What did you have in mind? Santos smiled like a prosecutor who'd just found her star witness. How would you feel about letting Mrs. Blackthorne steal your boat one more time? But this time, we'll be ready for her. The trap was about to be set, and Vivien Blackthorne was walking straight into it. Santos opened her briefcase with the precision of a surgeon, revealing documents that would change everything. The smell of fresh legal paper mixed with Tank's instant coffee as she spread financial records across his kitchen table. Mr. Morrison, what I'm about to show you goes far beyond boat theft. Santos pulled out a thick forensic accounting report. We've been investigating Pine Lake Estates HOA for 6 months, following a tip from the State Attorney General's office about unusual financial activity. Tank studied the numbers, his Coast Guard training and logistics helping him understand the patterns. Revenue discrepancies, inflated contractor payments, mysterious emergency assessments that never seemed to fund actual emergencies. Vivien Blackthorne has stolen over $340,000 from your community over 4 years, Santos continued. She's been systematically embezzling HOA funds while using her position to cover the theft. The revelation hit Tank like a rogue wave. This wasn't just about his boat or even her illegal charter business. Vivien had been running a sophisticated financial fraud operation, using the HOA as her personal ATM while terrorizing anyone who might question her authority. How? Tank's voice was steady, but his hands clenched around his coffee mug. Classic embezzlement scheme with a legal twist, Santos pointed to highlighted sections in the report. She inflates maintenance contracts with companies she secretly owns, approves unnecessary emergency repairs, and pockets the difference. Your monthly HOA fees are 23% higher than comparable communities because she's been stealing the excess. Tank thought about all the neighbors who'd struggled to pay increasing fees, elderly residents on fixed incomes choosing between medication and HOA assessments. Martha Coldwell had mentioned eating generic crackers for dinner to afford Vivien's latest roof inspection fee. But here's where it gets federal, Santos flipped to another section. She's been laundering the money through her unlicensed charter business, claiming the stolen HOA funds as legitimate business income on her tax returns. That's mail fraud, wire fraud, and tax evasion, all federal felonies. The prosecutor explained how Vivien's boat theft operation served multiple purposes. Stealing residents' boats reduced her charter business overhead while providing evidence for fraudulent insurance claims. Every boat she damaged or borrowed generated both criminal profits and civil lawsuit settlements. She's not just a petty HOA tyrant, Tank. She's running a RICO Enterprise A criminal organization using the HOA as cover for systematic fraud. Under federal RICO statutes, that carries up to 20 years in prison. Santos pulled out Tank's ace in the hole, security camera footage from his dock that accidentally captured Vivien's laptop screen during the boat theft. While loading party supplies, she'd left her computer open, unknowingly recording herself transferring $67,000 from the HOA reserve account to her personal Cayman Islands account. You have smoking gun evidence of both the theft and the embezzlement, Mr. Morrison. This footage is federal evidence that could put her away for decades. Tank stared at the grainy images on Santos's tablet. In trying to humiliate him with petty boat theft, Vivien had accidentally documented her massive financial crimes. The irony was almost poetic. What happens now? That's up to you. Santos leaned back in her chair. We can arrest her immediately based on this evidence, but she'll claim the laptop footage was obtained illegally. Better option, let her steal your boat again, this time with federal agents watching. Catch her red-handed with multiple witnesses, multiple crimes, no legal wiggle room. Tank thought about Sarah, about his father's funeral where this whole nightmare started, about every neighbor Vivien had bullied into silence. Justice served cold was still justice served. When do we do this? Santos smiled. Labor Day weekend. She's planning a huge promotional event for her charter business using your boat as the centerpiece. Local media invited, county officials attending, maximum public exposure. Perfect time for a very public arrest. The power dynamic had completely reversed. Vivien thought she was winning, but she was actually walking into the most sophisticated federal trap Tank had ever seen. Santos didn't waste time assembling her team. By Friday afternoon, Tank's quiet lakefront home had become mission control for the most elaborate sting operation Pine Lake Estates had ever seen. Jake Hendricks brought federal connections and tactical expertise, his weathered face serious as he spread marina surveillance photos across Tank's dining table. The smell of his black coffee mixed with the nervous energy filling the room. Coast Guard's been tracking Vivien's illegal charter operation for months, Jake explained, pointing to time-stamped photos. She's got a Labor Day weekend event planned, corporate retreat for some Detroit law firm, 50 guests, premium catering. She's charging $12,000 for the weekend. Martha Coldwell arrived with a banker's box full of documentation, her silver hair pulled back like she meant business. At 78, she moved with the determination of someone who'd spent decades organizing church fundraisers and neighborhood watch groups. I've got 4 years of HOA meeting minutes, financial records, and recorded phone calls, Martha announced, hefting the box onto Tank's kitchen counter. Every threat, every violation, every time she targeted someone who couldn't fight back. Tommy Kowalski, Tank's neighbor and retired electrician, knocked on the back door carrying a toolkit that looked like it belonged to the CIA. His thick Polish accent couldn't hide his excitement about finally getting revenge on the woman who'd driven him nearly to bankruptcy with harassment. Tank, I got surveillance equipment from my nephew's security company. Cameras smaller than quarters, wireless microphones, recording devices that look like car key fobs. We can document everything. Santos coordinated the legal strategy while the others planned technical operations. She'd learned that fighting sophisticated criminals required sophisticated preparation, and Vivien Blackthorne was definitely sophisticated. Here's what most people don't understand about federal RICO prosecutions, Santos explained while reviewing wiretap authorizations. The government needs to prove an ongoing criminal enterprise, not just individual crimes. That means documenting patterns of behavior over time. Tank absorbed the lesson, remembering similar principles from Coast Guard law enforcement training. Individual violations might be misdemeanors, but systematic criminal activity became federal felonies with serious prison time. The team developed a 3-phase strategy. Document everything, preserve evidence properly, and create an airtight federal case that even Vivien's expensive lawyers couldn't wiggle out of. Phase 1 is surveillance, Jake outlined, using Tank's marina photos as visual aids. We document her entire illegal charter operation, unlicensed commercial activity, safety violations, tax evasion through unreported income. Coast Guard regulations are crystal clear. Operating commercial charters without proper certification is a federal crime carrying 5 years per incident. Martha handled community organizing with the efficiency of someone who'd run successful political campaigns. I've identified 17 residents with documented grievances against Vivien. Each one represents a separate count of extortion or harassment. Together, they establish the criminal enterprise pattern Santos needs for RICO charges. Tommy's technical surveillance plan impressed even Jake's federal contacts. We wire Tank's boat with professional recording equipment before Vivien steals it again. Every conversation, every illegal charter activity, every moment of her Labor Day weekend crime spree gets captured in admissible federal evidence. Santos explained the legal framework that would make everything stick. Michigan is a one-party consent state for recording conversations, which means Tank can legally record anyone talking to him. But more importantly, Vivien's using navigable waterways for commercial activity, making this federal maritime law jurisdiction where different rules apply. The prosecutor's forensic accountant had traced Vivien's money laundering operation through multiple banks and offshore accounts. She's been reporting her stolen HOA funds as legitimate business income, paying taxes on money she embezzled to make it appear legal. Classic money laundering technique, but it creates federal tax fraud charges with mandatory minimum sentences. Tank learned something crucial about fighting institutional corruption. Individual victims rarely win against systematic criminal enterprises, but coordinated federal investigations with proper evidence gathering could destroy even sophisticated operations. The key is patience, Santos emphasized. Vivien thinks she's winning because Tank appears defeated. She'll get careless, take bigger risks, involve more people in her crimes. Labor Day weekend, she'll commit multiple federal felonies in front of witnesses while we record everything. Martha's community network provided the final piece. Labor Day weekend surveillance teams positioned around the lake, armed with cameras and recording devices, ready to document Vivien's criminal enterprise from multiple angles simultaneously. 23 residents volunteering as witnesses, Martha reported with satisfaction. People she's bullied for years, finally ready to fight back because Tank showed them it was possible. Tommy finished installing microcameras throughout Tank's boat, each device invisible but capable of recording broadcast-quality video and audio. She steals the boat. She's stealing federal evidence-gathering equipment. Every word, every action, every crime gets documented automatically. As the sun set over Pine Lake, Tank looked around his living room at the most unlikely team of federal investigators ever assembled. A prosecutor, a Marine Patrol officer, a retired electrician, and a 78-year-old church lady planning the downfall of a criminal mastermind. Sarah would have loved the irony, her widowed husband accidentally becoming the leader of a federal law enforcement operation, all because some entitled lawyer thought she could steal a boat without consequences. Word count, 799, 800, target hit. Vivien's desperation showed in her increasingly reckless moves. She'd sensed something shifting in the community's mood. Residents whispering in grocery store aisles, neighbors suddenly refusing to make eye contact with her at the mailbox. The smell of fear was something Tank recognized from his Coast Guard days, and Vivien reeked of it. Her first panic move came Tuesday morning, an emergency HOA meeting to dissolve the community entirely and sell the entire property to Lakefront Development Corp. A company that didn't exist until Vivien's husband incorporated it the day before. The paperwork, rushed and sloppy, contained enough legal errors to void the whole scheme. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vivien announced to the hastily assembled residents, her voice carrying a slight tremor she couldn't quite hide. "Market conditions require immediate action. Lakefront Development has made an extraordinary offer for our entire community, enough to pay every homeowner above market value." Martha Coldwell raised her hand from the back row. "Vivien, dear, who exactly owns Lakefront Development Corporation?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Vivien's pause lasted 3 seconds too long. "That's proprietary information, Martha. The important thing is securing our property values before the market turns." But Tank could see residents exchanging glances. Tommy Kowalski had done his homework, quietly researching the corporation's filing documents. The smell of Vivien's expensive perfume couldn't mask the stench of her obvious lies. Her second desperate move targeted Tank directly through his veterans' benefits. Thursday afternoon, Tank received certified mail from the VA Disability Office. Reevaluation required due to behavioral concerns reported by community members. The letter, clearly orchestrated by Vivien's connections, claimed Tank had exhibited aggressive tendencies and concerning fixation on authority figures that warranted immediate psychological evaluation. If the VA found him mentally unstable, his disability payments would stop, and more importantly, his credibility as a witness would be destroyed. Vivien had researched him thoroughly. She knew Tank's monthly disability check covered most of his living expenses, knew losing it would force him to sell his lakefront property, knew desperation made people accept bad deals. She'd used the same tactic on other veterans in the community, but Tank had learned something important about fighting systematic predators. They always revealed their methods when they got scared. Vivien's attack on his veterans' benefits showed she was terrified of federal investigation, desperate to discredit him before Labor Day weekend. Jake's federal contacts provided Tank's countermove, a complete psychological evaluation by a VA-approved psychiatrist who specialized in assessing combat veterans. Dr. Patricia Williams had 20 years of experience identifying genuine PTSD versus fabricated claims designed to discredit veterans. Mr. Morrison, Dr. Williams explained after Tank's 3-hour evaluation, whoever filed this complaint clearly doesn't understand how PTSD actually manifests. Your behavioral profile shows classic signs of healthy grief processing and appropriate anger at injustice, exactly what we'd expect from a well-adjusted veteran facing systematic harassment. Her report, filed with both the VA and federal prosecutors, not only cleared Tank of mental health concerns but documented evidence of harassment designed to weaponize the disability system against veterans. Another federal crime to add to Vivien's growing list. Tank's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Santos. Vivien just contacted 3 board members separately, offering $50,000 each to support the property sale. Wire fraud and bribery charges now active. The prosecutor had anticipated Vivien's corruption attempts, convincing board members to record their conversations with FBI-provided devices. Every bribe offer, every threat, every attempt to buy silence was being captured as federal evidence. Martha's intelligence network revealed Vivien's third panic move, a whisper campaign claiming Tank was planning violent retaliation against the HOA. She'd hired private investigators to dig up dirt on Tank's military service, looking for anything that might suggest dangerous tendencies. She's telling people you have combat-related anger issues, Martha reported during their evening strategy meeting. Says you threatened her with physical violence during the graduation party confrontation. Tank felt his jaw tighten. Attacking a veteran's mental health was the lowest form of character assassination, designed to trigger stereotypes about dangerous, unstable ex-soldiers. It was also completely fabricated. The graduation party confrontation had been witnessed by 20 people, none of whom would corroborate Vivien's version. But her lies revealed something crucial. She was terrified of Tank specifically because his military background made him credible to federal investigators. Coast Guard veterans knew how to document evidence, follow procedures, and testify effectively in criminal proceedings. Tommy's surveillance equipment captured Vivien's final desperate move Friday evening. She met with a known private investigator at Danny's Diner, paying cash for what appeared to be illegal surveillance services targeting Tank's daily activities. She's looking for anything to discredit you before Labor Day, Jake observed, reviewing the recorded conversation. Hiring people to follow you, photographing your routine, trying to catch you doing something questionable. Tank smiled grimly, let her waste money on surveillance. All her investigators would document was a retired veteran who helped neighbors fix their boats, visited his wife's grave every Sunday, and spent evenings preparing evidence for federal prosecutors. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and Vivien Blackthorne had no idea what was coming for her. Vivien's final week before Labor Day showed a woman completely unhinged by desperation. Tank watched from his kitchen window as she paced her mansion's deck at 2 a.m., phone pressed to her ear, gesticulating wildly at the darkness. The sweet smell of night-blooming jasmine couldn't mask the bitter taste of watching someone's world collapse in real time. Her nuclear option came Monday morning. Vivien attempted to transfer the remaining $180,000 in HOA reserve funds to a Cayman Islands account, claiming emergency financial restructuring to protect community assets from legal action. The wire transfer, flagged automatically by federal banking surveillance, triggered immediate FBI asset freezing protocols. But Vivien's desperation had made her sloppy. She'd used the HOA's main computer for the transfer, not realizing Martha had installed keylogger software during last month's board meeting. Every password, every account number, every incriminating email was being recorded and transmitted directly to federal investigators. She's panicking, Santos reported during their Tuesday evening briefing in Tank's living room. The prosecutor's satisfaction was evident as she reviewed transaction records. Attempted money laundering while under federal investigation carries mandatory minimum sentencing. She just guaranteed herself prison time. Vivien's second nuclear move targeted the evidence directly. Wednesday night, she staged a break-in at the HOA office, destroying financial records dating back 4 years. Security cameras captured her entering with Dr. Blackthorne's medical bag, presumably to stage the scene as a drug-seeking burglary. But Tommy's hidden cameras had already digitized everything. While Vivien destroyed physical documents, federal prosecutors possessed complete electronic copies of every fraudulent transaction, every forged signature, every piece of evidence she thought she was eliminating. Classic criminal mistake, Jake observed, watching footage of Vivien feeding documents into an industrial shredder at 3 a.m. She thinks destroying evidence eliminates the crime, but modern federal investigations preserve everything digitally before suspects even know they're under surveillance. Tank felt a familiar satisfaction from his Coast Guard days watching criminals outsmart themselves through their own desperation. Vivien's evidence destruction added obstruction of justice charges to her already substantial federal indictment. Her third nuclear move proved she'd completely lost perspective. Vivien contacted local media, claiming she was the victim of a coordinated harassment campaign by mentally unstable veterans with extremist political motivations. Channel 7 News agreed to interview her Friday morning, 2 days before the Labor Day sting operation. Martha's community network went into overdrive, ensuring every resident understood Vivien's media strategy. The woman who'd terrorized them for years was now playing victim, claiming the very people she'd bullied were somehow persecuting her. "She's trying to control the narrative before we arrest her," Santos explained. "Classic defense attorney tactic: get your version of events into public consciousness first, make law enforcement look like they're persecuting an innocent victim." But Vivien's media appearance backfired spectacularly. Channel 7's investigative reporter Michael Torres had done his homework. Instead of softball questions about veteran harassment, Torres asked pointed questions about missing HOA funds, unlicensed charter operations, and federal investigation rumors. Tank watched Vivien squirm on live television as Torres presented financial discrepancies, insurance fraud allegations, and resident complaints documenting years of systematic abuse. Her polished attorney facade cracked completely when Torres asked about the $180,000 Cayman Islands wire transfer attempt. That's completely taken out of context," Vivien stammered, her face flushing red under the studio lights. "Those funds were being protected from frivolous litigation by disgruntled residents who don't understand community management." Torres leaned forward like a shark smelling blood. "Mrs. Blackthorne, federal banking records show you attempted to transfer HOA funds to a personal account. How is that protecting community assets?" The interview went viral within hours. Tank's phone buzzed with messages from neighbors who'd never spoken to him before, all expressing amazement that someone had finally called out Vivien's behavior publicly. Her attempt to discredit him had instead exposed her own criminal conduct to thousands of viewers. Her final desperate gambit came Saturday afternoon, 18 hours before the Labor Day sting operation. Vivien offered Tank $500,000 cash to resolve all community disputes amicably and relocate to a different area. The meeting, secretly recorded by federal agents, took place at the community dock where Tank's boat should have been moored. Vivien arrived with a briefcase full of cash money almost certainly stolen from various fraud schemes and the arrogance of someone who thought everyone had a price. "Mr. Morrison, this community conflict has gone too far," Vivien said, her voice artificially calm. "I'm prepared to make you a generous offer to end this unfortunate misunderstanding." Tank looked at the cash, then at the woman who'd stolen his boat, terrorized his neighbors, and tried to destroy his reputation. "Mrs. Blackthorne, you can't buy your way out of federal crimes." "What federal crimes? I haven't been charged with anything." Tank smiled. "Give it 24 hours. Vivien's face went pale as she realized her bribery attempt had been recorded. Federal agents watching from Martha's house had captured her offering cash to influence a federal witness, yet another felony to add to her indictment. The trap was set. Labor Day weekend would be Vivien Blackthorne's final performance as Pine Lake Estate's corrupt queen, and Tank had front row seats to watch justice finally arrive. Labor Day weekend arrived with perfect weather, sunny skies, gentle breeze, and crystal clear water that would give federal agents perfect visibility for what was about to unfold. Tank positioned himself at Martha's house with binoculars and a direct radio link to Jake's Coast Guard patrol boat, watching Vivien's elaborate celebrations set up across the lake. The smell of expensive catering drifted across Pine Lake as Vivien's Community Leadership Appreciation event kicked into high gear. 50-plus residents mingled on her lakefront lawn while county commissioners, local media, and Detroit law firm executives loaded onto Sarah's dream for what they believed was a luxury charter experience. Vivien had outdone herself with the staging white linen tablecloths, professional bartenders, a string quartet playing classical music. She wore a flowing red dress that probably cost more than Tank's monthly disability check, playing hostess like she was running for political office. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vivien's voice carried across the water through a wireless microphone, "welcome to what Pine Lake Estates represents at its finest: community leadership, environmental stewardship, and premium lakefront living." Tank watched through binoculars as she gestured toward his stolen boat, packed with paying customers who had no idea they were about to witness federal history. Channel 7's camera crew filmed everything, believing they were documenting a successful community leader's celebration. At exactly 2:47 p.m., Jake's Coast Guard patrol boat appeared around the northern point of Pine Lake. The distinctive rumble of twin federal engines cut through party chatter as the official vessel approached Sarah's Dream with emergency lights flashing. "Attention vessel operator," Jake's amplified voice echoed across the water. "This is U.S. Coast Guard conducting mandatory safety inspection. Prepare to be boarded." Tank watched Vivien's face change from confident hostess to confused panic in 3 seconds. She grabbed the boat's radio microphone, her voice suddenly shrill. "Officer, this is a private community event. We're not engaging in commercial activity." Jake's response was textbook federal authority. "Ma'am, we have reports of unlicensed passenger-for-hire operations on this vessel. Please present ownership documentation and commercial operator permits." The party guests sensed something serious happening as additional federal boats appeared: FBI Marine Unit, County Sheriff's Patrol, and Michigan DNR enforcement. What had seemed like routine inspection was clearly a coordinated law enforcement operation. Vivien produced her forged ownership documents with shaking hands, the same papers she'd used to claim Tank's boat during previous thefts. "Officer, I can explain everything. This vessel was transferred to the HOA for community safety purposes." Jake examined the documents while federal agents positioned themselves around the boat. His weathered face remained professionally neutral as he radioed for backup, but Tank could see him suppressing a grin. "Ma'am, these ownership documents don't match federal registration records. The registered owner is Mr. Thaddeus Morrison of Pine Lake Estates. Are you Mr. Morrison?" The moment of truth arrived with perfect, dramatic timing. Tank stepped out of Martha's house, walked down to the community dock, and waved at the news cameras capturing everything. "I'm Thaddeus Morrison," his voice carried clearly across the water. "That's my boat. She's been operating illegally for months." Vivien's face went white as she realized she'd been caught red-handed on live television, in front of county officials, with 50 witnesses and professional news cameras documenting her federal crimes. "This is ridiculous," she screamed into the radio. "Mr. Morrison is mentally unstable. He's been harassing our community for months. Those ownership documents are invalid." Santos appeared beside Tank at the dock, her prosecutor's badge clearly visible to news cameras. "Mrs. Blackthorne, I'm County Prosecutor Rebecca Santos. You're under federal investigation for maritime fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering. Please cooperate with Coast Guard boarding procedures." The party guests realized they were witnessing something far more serious than a community celebration. County commissioners who'd accepted Vivien's hospitality suddenly found themselves potential witnesses in a federal criminal case. Jake's boarding team found Tommy's hidden surveillance equipment, still recording every word of Vivien's incriminating statements. They also discovered her laptop, open to banking websites showing attempted wire transfers to offshore accounts. "Mrs. Blackthorne," Jake announced formally, "you're under arrest for theft of this vessel, operation of unlicensed commercial charters, and federal maritime violations. You have the right to remain silent." The news cameras captured everything: Vivien being handcuffed on Tank's stolen boat, wealthy party guests scrambling to distance themselves from obvious criminal activity, county officials claiming they had no knowledge of any illegal operations. Tank's mic drop moment came when Channel 7's Michael Torres thrust a microphone in his face. "Mr. Morrison, how does it feel watching the woman who stole your boat get arrested?" Tank looked directly into the camera, his voice calm and measured. "Justice isn't about revenge. It's about protecting communities from people who abuse power to hurt vulnerable neighbors." Mrs. Blackthorne forgot that every veteran swore an oath to defend people who can't defend themselves. Martha appeared beside him, her 78-year-old voice carrying across the lake. "This community spent 4 years being terrorized by a criminal enterprise. Today, we got our freedom back." As federal agents led Vivien away in handcuffs, her red dress now wrinkled and stained, Tank felt Sarah's presence like a warm hand on his shoulder. His wife would have been proud, not of the revenge, but of the protection he'd provided to every neighbor who'd been too scared to fight back. 6 months later, Tank stood on his dock watching Sarah's Dream cut through morning mist, this time carrying 3 young veterans learning boat maintenance as part of the Sarah Morrison Veterans Marine Fund therapy program. The sweet smell of fresh pine mixed with engine oil and the sound of genuine laughter, something that had been missing from Pine Lake for years. Vivien's federal sentencing had been swift and merciless. 4 years in minimum security prison, $340,000 in restitution to defrauded HOA members, and permanent disbarment from practicing law. The judge's words still echoed in Tank's memory. Mrs. Blackthorne, you violated the trust of an entire community for personal gain. That betrayal strikes at the heart of what makes neighborhoods safe and decent. Dr. Blackthorne had filed for divorce within 60 days, his medical practice barely surviving the scandal. Their mansion sold at auction for 60 cents on the dollar, with proceeds funding complete restitution to every resident Vivien had defrauded over 4 years. The immediate aftermath felt like a community awakening from a nightmare. Emergency elections replaced the entire HOA board with reform candidates led by Martha Coldwell as president. The smell of fresh paint filled the community center as volunteers transformed it from Vivien's intimidation headquarters into a welcoming gathering space. Monthly HOA fees dropped 32% once Vivien's fraudulent charges were eliminated. Tank watched neighbors who'd struggled to pay inflated assessments suddenly able to afford home improvements, family vacations, and grandchildren's college funds, money that should never have been stolen in the first place. "Tank, you gave us our dignity back," Martha had told him at the victory celebration, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks while the entire community applauded, not just from her, but from accepting that bullies always win and good people suffer in silence. The real healing came through service. Tank's garage workshop buzzed with activity every evening as veterans learned boat restoration techniques while sharing their stories. Marine veteran Jessica Rodriguez ran her hand along the freshly varnished gunnel of a donated fishing boat, her voice steady for the first time in months. "Mr. Morrison taught me that grief doesn't disappear, but it can become fuel for protecting other people." The workshop smelled of marine varnish, engine oil, and hope. Tank found unexpected peace watching broken people fix broken boats while healing themselves through craftsmanship and community. Sarah would have loved seeing her husband's therapy project become therapy for others. Martha's HOA Accountability Network grew into a statewide organization, her documentation methods becoming templates for federal investigators. 17 additional RICO prosecutions of corrupt HOA operations followed Pine Lake's model, with Martha testifying as expert witness on community organizing tactics. Pine Lake estates thrived under transparent leadership and mutual support. Property values increased as word spread about the community that had successfully prosecuted systematic corruption. New residents were drawn to a place where accountability mattered and neighbors genuinely protected each other. Tank regularly received calls from veterans and homeowners facing similar harassment. During a recent conversation with a Navy veteran in Florida, Tank shared the most important lesson. Document everything, know your rights, and remember that bullies survive by keeping good people isolated. When communities unite, even sophisticated criminals can't win. Standing on his dock this golden autumn morning, Tank watched the Veterans Program participants return with faces transformed by purpose and brotherhood. For the first time since Sarah's death, he felt genuinely excited about tomorrow. His phone buzzed with a text from Santos. "Tank, prosecutor in Texas needs consultation on HOA embezzlement case. Similar pattern to Vivien's operation. Community organizing expertise requested." Tank smiled, pocketing the phone. Sarah's legacy lived on through every corrupt system challenged, every vulnerable neighbor protected, every veteran who discovered healing through service to others. The mission continued, one community at a time. If you've survived an HOA nightmare or watched petty authority destroy good people in your neighborhood, share your story in the comments below. The Karen Stories community is here to remind you that you're not alone in fighting systematic abuse. And sometimes the most powerful weapon against corruption is simply refusing to stay silent. Subscribe to Karen Stories and hit that bell if you want to see more stories about ordinary people standing up to corrupt systems and winning through community action. Next week, we'll hear from Maria, whose slumlord thought he could intimidate a single mother until she discovered his Section 8 fraud and turned the federal housing system into her personal army of justice.